The second season of Young Justice was all about changes, and with change naturally comes loss. The loss of places that we once loved, the loss of characters and their previous identities, and the loss of people in general. Wally West is one of those people that we lost in the second season of Young Justice, and in my opinion, Wally West needed to die. Now, before all of you guys crucify me, Wally West was by far my favorite character in the first season of Young Justice. Him and Artemis were my 1A and 1B of favorites. I absolutely loved Wally West. I loved what he represented. I loved him as the humor to the show, but also the heart to the show. And in my opinion, Wally was one of the most well-done characters in that first season out of a cast of extremely well-done characters. Cold Hearted is still by far my favorite episode in the entire show out of all of its seasons. This version of Wally West, despite some of its inconsistencies with him, for example, being slower than other versions of Wally, proved to be my favorite adaptation of the character. Outside of the comic books, this is my one go-to for Wally West. And I hope that by the end of this video, you'll at least come to understand why I believe he needed to die in the second season of the show, despite how much I loved him as a character. So please bear with me, and without further ado, let's get to why Wally West needed to die in the second season of Young Justice. And really, it actually starts way back in season 1. I spent a lot of my time in the video I made talking about Wally West in the first season, explaining how his home life is so much different from the rest of the superheroes. Wally comes from a family of superheroes. Jay Garrick's Flash, Barry Allen's Flash. Wally decided to repeat the same experiment his uncle Barry did in order to get his superpowers, because he viewed being a superhero as cool. He viewed saving the day as fun. To Wally, the superhero life was normal. It was something to follow in the footsteps of the rest of his family. To him, it was fun and novel. To a lot of the rest of the cast members of Young Justice, this is either their first experience being a superhero, or this is something that they have been ingrained with from a mentor that takes the game far more seriously. This life that Wally West leads, that his uncle Barry leads, that Jay Garrick led, is dangerous. This life is not something to play with. It's something that we see Kid Flash start to understand as the show goes on, especially in Cold Hearted. Wally originally belimes the idea of basically running an Oregon cross country to save the life of some princess. He would much rather be working with the Flash and the rest of the team and the League in order to take down all of the ice villains going around. He doesn't recognize necessarily the importance of saving this one girl's life. But by the end of the episode, what Wally West truly learns is that in saving this young girl's life, it was the greatest thing that he might ever do in his. A big theme for Wally throughout the first season was learning that this life has consequences, and that this life isn't just about beating up supervillains and collecting cool looking souvenirs. And that's something we see follow us even through the 5-year time skip. Now, I know the idea of making a time skip and not showing any of it on screen and relegating a lot of it to tie-in comic books and a tie-in video game that was objectively terrible, even if I loved it personally as a dumb child, was not a cool move. But a lot of the reason as to why Wally retired and left the life behind comes from that tie-in video game. You see, during the tie-in game, the team has to experience a terrible loss that is in one of their new members, Tula. Tula being Aqualad's love interest from the very first season of the show. Tula ends up dying on a mission gone wrong, and this is finally the trigger for Wally. Off screen, we had seen the deaths of the second Blue Beetle, we had the death of Jason Todd, we had the figuring out that Wally had been friends with a clone the whole time. The real Speedy had never been outside of cryotherapy. They had never met the real Speedy. They had only met the Roy Harper that they know. All of these things started to compound, and ultimately Wally decided to retire and to take a step back from the life of being a superhero because it was dangerous, because Wally realized that it is far too much for even him and Artemis to handle. The two ultimately decided to retire and to focus on their studies, to go to school, to live a normal life. At least attempt to live a normal life. And for Wally, that does not mean abandoning his friends, not even in the slightest. He is still there for the team, but he's not there in the capacity of Kid Flash anymore. For all intents and purposes, catchphrase, Wally West's Kid Flash died the day Tula died. Wally appeared in 24 of the original 26 episodes from the first season of this show. He was a founding member of the team and an integral core part of it. Yet for the second season, Wally appears 9 times out of 20, less than 50%, and a majority of those times are front-loaded, meaning the second half and last half of the season is majorly without Wally West. We follow other characters instead, some who have taken his place as the jokester, some who has taken his place as the heart, but nobody that has replaced Wally as a character when it comes to the sense of his presence. The first episode that we see Wally West make an actual appearance happens to be the very same one that we get to see Roy Harper for the first time. He's looking extremely disheveled and clearly is in need of an intervention from his friends, Wally being one of those friends. Despite leaving the life behind and despite putting the cape and cowl down, he hasn't given up on his friends. He hasn't given up on being a good friend to these people that grew up with him. He recognizes Roy for being the man that he is, the man that is his friend, because he's only ever known this version of Roy Harper. He doesn't know anybody else. And so he tries to be there for his friend. And ultimately, that's unsuccessful. Roy is too stuck in his own mind and too stuck on finding the quote-unquote real Roy Harper to hear anything that Wally has to say. And so ultimately, he has to give up because you're not able to help somebody who isn't ready to help themselves. Wally recognizes that. But it is in this first appearance, though, that we also get to see something absolutely beautiful. We get to see the fruits of the Wally and Artemis relationship that had been building throughout a majority of the first season and had gone through a lot during those 5 years in between, through high school, through college, through moving in together, through creating a life together outside of being superheroes. It's something beautiful to see. It's something that, for me personally, I've always wanted to see superheroes do, to grow up, to get families, to move on, even if it's with the cape and cowl or without it. It's something that I think this show did wonderfully well. It's why I love the time skip. The idea that these characters actually grow. Something modern comics seem extremely afraid to do, too afraid to let characters like Batman grow, characters like the Flash grow. This show chose to go in the opposite direction, and it's beautiful.
Well, I remembered too. I got you your favorite food. Everything.
Babe, you rock.
The second time we get to see Wally, it's less fun for him and less enjoyable for him. Not that exactly being part of an intervention for your friend is fun, but it's not fun in the sense that he has to come out of being a superhero. He has to unretire from being the Kid Flash, at least for a little bit, due to the fact that his relative from the far-off future happens to come back in time. And this also soft launches his technical replacement, even though Impulse is his own character, and I really don't want to call Impulse a replacement because he's a wonderful character and shouldn't have to live up to the standards of an expertly written character like Wally West, but unfortunately some fans do view him that way. Disclaimer aside, Wally West does come in to help with the Impulse problem, or at least problem during this first episode. And it's absolutely wonderful that we get to see Impulse and Wally interact, and it's also a great bit of nostalgia that we get to see Wally in costume for what is going to be the first out of 3 episodes that we will see him suited up as Kid Flash once again.
You're Wally West, my first cousin once removed.
The operative word being removed.
Impulse and Wally West, especially with the Flash teaming up, is one of my personal favorite episodes of the show. It has a lot of significance for Wally West, specifically in the idea that he comes out of costume, comes out of retirement when his friends need him most. It's the idea that despite everything around Wally, despite the retirement, despite the sadness, and despite the reality of the dangers that come with the life, when he is needed, he will always be there for his friends. It's part of what, for me, made Wally such a great and fantastic character in this show. As well, this also leads to the idea of being important for Impulse. It's Impulse's introduction episode, and he's highly important to this season, along with Blue Beetle. Those two things aren't really important for this episode, but what is the slow and minor allusions this episode makes towards Wally's death in the final episode. It's also worth noting that Wally is wearing his costume before he got it upgraded, so no elbow pads, no shoulder pads, no like eating compartment. It's just to prove once again he's been out of the suit for a while. And also we run into one of my personal favorite gags from the second season.
You getting any of this?
Every fifth word, maybe. Flash! Yo, Flash!
Sorry, got sidetracked. You on board?
With what?
Although the one thing I think I dislike the most about this episode is the idea that Wally is more than willing to fling himself back into danger when called upon, even though it puts into jeopardy the life that he has been making with Artemis. One in which they both mutually agreed to retire, one in which both characters ultimately decided to step away. And as much as I do love this episode, it is a little bit frustrating to see just how slow Wally is, and to also see him have to come out of retirement like this. But ultimately, it's still way too enjoyable to just be like I'm just being very nitpicky right now because it helps fill my narrative in for what I'm trying to get my point across with. And this episode also, as I mentioned earlier, does an amazing job alluding to Wally's future death. The way in which the team tries to run around the man who's about to literally blow himself up and a majority of the city up is ultimately the same way in which they try to defeat the weather storm at the end of the season finale. It's something that is extremely telling when you watch this after like the first time. And it's pretty ironic when you look at the very next episode Wally appears in, being one in which Dick Grayson asked Artemis to come back and be Artemis. Well, to only be Artemis for one mission. You see, when Wally comes back, he is okay with putting himself at danger, but doesn't like the idea of specifically his best friend asking his girlfriend to put herself at an extreme risk, that being to fake die and to go undercover as an agent. Now, when you watch this episode for the first time, you truly do feel for Wally West because he is trying to retire and he is trying to do better, and Artemis ultimately ends up dying. Something that is completely out of left field and is not shocking the way in which Wally reacts to her wanting to leave to go be a superhero once again, even if it is a bit hypocritical.
My best friend. He knows we're trying to leave the life behind.
Don't blame Nightwing. The decision was mine.
Wally is now also burdened with the idea that he has to keep this secret for Dick Grayson and secret from the team, specifically from his friends, which is kind of crazy to see, especially because Wally himself is still shown to be quite close to the friends that he made being in the team. It's not exactly like it was that far off for him to keep in contact with a lot of them. He still cared for a lot of the members on the team, and he's already been keeping the secret of Calder as though that wasn't enough being on the team. That being that like Calder's evil, in case this is your first time hearing about this, but I'm gonna assume if you clicked on this video, you probably are paying attention and hearing this. Either way, Wally now has to keep this secret from what is ostensibly part of his family, especially in members like Superboy, and it doesn't really sit right with me that he would keep this secret, especially knowing that he formed this team to no longer keep these secrets. For somebody who says they want to leave the life so badly, he flirts dangerously with the line of being in the life and also no longer being in the life. To me, it's a little bit of foreshadowing and telling that even though he wants to leave, it'll never leave him. Right? It's almost as though this life has a bit of a hold on him he'll never be able to let go of, no matter how much he says he wants to. And ultimately, him not letting go of the life would eventually lead to his death. It is partly a cautionary tale of not being able to let go of something that may be dangerous. And while I'll get more on Wally's death near the end of this video, so please bear with me, I do want to set up where he is as a character and where we see him throughout the entirety of this second season. And since I'm here and I really want to mention it, Calder was really out here aura farming before he killed Artemis. Like, that's got to be one of the craziest things I've ever seen. And side tangent over, Wally isn't exactly the happiest when it comes to the situation in general, and he makes that very clear to Dick.
They're in.
Who are you kidding? It only gets more dangerous from here.
And what is, in my opinion, the most heartbreaking scene to come out of this entire saga is having to see Artemis's mother crying at her daughter's grave. They didn't even want to include Artemis's mother in this, and Wally, still having one foot in the life and one foot out, keeps the lie in front of a woman that would eventually one day become his mother-in-law if the relationship with Artemis continued, someone he wanted to be his mother-in-law. That man loved Artemis more than anything, and he loved family. We see that with his family. We see that with Dick. Despite their turmoil and constant bickering in the second season, he views Dick as a brother. Those two are so close, even relative to Calder or relative to Red Arrow. Dick and Wally are like this. And ultimately, it's that relationship that leads him to lying to a woman that would eventually be his mother-in-law, to the woman that is the mother of the greatest love of his life. Now, part of that responsibility is on Artemis, so I'm not putting all the shade and all the blame on Wally. But again, it's the idea that he's still got one foot in and one foot out, and it leads to this absolutely gut-wrenching scene.
This has been the hardest 2 days of my life. Harder than prison, than losing the use of my legs, than losing Jade to the life. I could not have survived this without you.
And we see just how much of this truly weighs on Wally as a character, especially in the next episode that we see him in. This episode's entire idea was that it's a little bit of shock value because it involves destroying the cave, a place that we as an audience have come to love, a place that I came to view as somewhere that I'd want to be, a place that I would never want to see go. It's a wonderful set piece. It is the housing of the beginning of the team, the middle of the team, and the end of the team, in this context anyways. And I absolutely was devastated to see it go. It's something that Wally was also devastated to see go, but not for the same reasons. He was upset that Robin, Nightwing, decided to use this place that was a home for his friends, for his family, less so about his souvenirs now, but a place that housed so many memories, including memorials for those friends that he had lost, and ultimately to trade it for information and to better their timing against the light. It's something that didn't sit with Wally well in the slightest. Didn't really sit well with me either. I wasn't a huge fan of this, but that's besides the point. Wally himself ultimately goes to confront Dick about this in a legitimately explosive argument, because at the end of the day, it all boils down to one thing. This man loves Artemis, and as much as he might have one foot in and one foot out, he is finally ready to pull both feet out, at least for right now, especially when it comes to endangering the woman that he loves more than anything. And ultimately, he expresses this to Dick, and it gets a little nasty.
He took 3 more hostages, members of your team.
And we'll rescue them when we rescue Lagoon Boy.
Dick, he blew up the cave!
To Wally, this was far more than just losing the cave. This was putting his friends in danger, his family in danger, his former teammates in danger. This to him was something far, far larger. And unfortunately, he has to do nothing but sit on the sidelines because that's the place that he's chosen. And it's something that I think will push him later in the season to go out and join them for their final assault on the light. Artemis, for the record, has been a very active component throughout this entire season since coming back in like the second episode. She's pretty much been a mainstay throughout it, just with Calder's subplot rather than the rest of the team, even as Wally continues to sit on the sidelines.
Are you serious? I don't care about that junk! I'm worried about Artemis, terrified for her. You put her right into his hands.
The situation has him so stressed, he's even willing to admit that perhaps one of his closest friends, a man that he grew up with and loved as a brother, may be going too far undercover. He may be too deep. The idea that Black Manta is his father, the idea that the love of his life died only a few short months ago, is all things that are fresh in Wally's mind. And while he doesn't levy that accusation from a healthy level of skepticism, he is ultimately wrong. Calder is always 10 tone down for the team. We love Calder. He's the GOAT. No much more for me to say on that topic. But that's the last time we see Wally until the finale of this show. For the rest of the episodes in this season, we won't see Wally until the final 2. That is it. He is truly very front-loaded, and even with being front-loaded, he only has one real episode where he's the main character or is given more than like 6 or 7 minutes of screen time at all. It is genuinely something sad to see from a character that was one of my favorites, if not my favorite from the first season. And once again, I think it was well warranted. If you truly wanted to sell the idea that Wally was retired and that Wally didn't want to be a part of this life anymore, he could not be a mainstay on the roster. If you wanted to sell the idea that Artemis was having second thoughts about leaving the superhero life behind, and that perhaps this is what she wanted to continue to do, you had to keep her on the main roster the entire time. These are all things that I think the showrunners did very well, even if it meant that I have to lose out on bits and pieces of my favorite character. Now, I do want to say that the second season is my favorite season by far, even if it did shaft my favorite character a little bit. At least favorite character from the first season. Blue Beetle became my favorite character from this one by far. Probably due to the absence of Wally West in a lot of these episodes. This season was only 20 episodes long, and personally, I would have liked to have seen it be 21. I wanted one episode where I could have seen Wally and Dick reconcile. That's something that we didn't see at all in the show, and maybe it was in one of the tie-in comics, but we should have really put it in the show. It should have been there. I wish we could have had an extra episode for that. Although maybe it does just add to the tragedy and to the sadness of losing Wally West. The idea that him and Nightwing never really made up in a way in which that we saw on camera. Part of that may also help lead to the tragedy that is the ending of this second season. And with all of that out of the way, that leads us to the 2-part finale. Something that I've been personally dreading since I decided to cover the second season of this show. It is ultimately having to see one of my personal favorite characters die. Despite the title of this video, despite the fact that I have repeatedly said that Wally West needed to die, I never wanted him to die. I never wanted to see a time skip. Part of me that is still that child that watched this TV show back when it was not really originally airing. I watched it on DVDs. That watched this show on DVDs as a kid really wanted to see Wally West live. He really wanted to just get a second season of spoon-fed goodness of Young Justice, something that didn't feel real, something that didn't feel adult, something that didn't feel as though it was going to continue on even if I watched or not. And that's how this show feels. It feels adult. It feels as though the world goes on even when we aren't looking as the audience. It's part of the beauty of a show like this, but it's also part of its own downfall in my heart. One of the things that really struck me the most was the idea that Wally West in and of himself was still ready to give up being Kid Flash. That Wally still no longer wanted to run this role as Kid Flash. He was more than willing and more than ready to give it up to Bart, to give it up to Impulse. Somebody has to carry on the Kid Flash legacy. And I think having to see him say that, see him say that he wanted to give it up, has to be one of the most painful things, knowing how it all ends. That wasn't something I expected even in the slightest. Personally, I never even saw Wally's death coming.
Hey, once this whole invasion thing's over, Artemis and I are going back into retirement. Someone needs to carry on the family tradition.
Dude, that is so crash!
And well, the team may have been successful today on this day fighting the light before the Reach's ultimate plan to nuke the Earth comes into fruition. It was genuinely beautiful getting to see the team have a success. The season was filled not only with change and loss, but with tremendous setbacks, constantly. Whether it was Calder being undercover, whether it was the team not working cohesively, people like Blue Beetle, Wally West finding that the leadership given to him by Robin or Nightwing, I apologize, was not adequate. All of these things compounded on each other into seeing a beautiful victory fighting against the light. All of the risks that were taken, all of the people put in danger, ultimately it all paid off because they won on that day. All of it paid off for those few minutes. Again, it's so painful to have to go back and watch this. Right, I realized I haven't really mentioned the Reach, and they're kind of important to this last part of the video, so while I'm here, the Reach are an intergalactic species that created the Scarabs. They're using the Scarabs on people like Blue Beetle to be an ambassador for the world, and being an ambassador for the world, Blue Beetle is also going to be mind-controlled and used to hopefully take over the world, because the Reach want to harvest what the humans have and call a metagene. You see, the metagene is what humans use to get their powers. Think Black Canary, Black Lightning, Static Shock, Flash, right? It's all in a metagene. They're all metahumans. The Reach wants to harvest this and use them as either A, human batteries, or B, as soldiers, and also intergalactic slave trade, but we don't learn that until the 3rd season because this is still a kid's show at this point. Either way, all of these things compound into the Reach having a contingency plan in case humanity was too strong, humanity fought back, and ultimately was going to be in a position to defeat them. That contingency plan was to cause irreversible weather damage to the entire world using these little devices. And of course, everybody needs to group up, team up, and split up in order to destroy each one of these boxes. And when we get to see Kid Flash and Artemis team up to destroy these boxes, the dude is jolly. He's talking about going back to Paris with her, taking her on vacation, loving her, and enjoying life with her. And Artemis is still thinking like she's gonna be in the game, talking about things like there will always be a world to save. And that is no more truer than when they find the last box on Antarctica. It is one that is going to basically act as a nuke and explode. And so the Flash team, specifically Barry and Impulse, need to run in grand circles in order to fling it up into the sky. And what does Barry do? He ultimately realizes they're not going to have enough. And so Wally, in realizing there's not enough speed just between the two of them, despite being slower, he ultimately ends up joining in. And in doing so, he gives his life away to save the world. Wally ends up giving his own life in order to save everybody, despite knowing that he is slower, despite being slower, despite saying how many times he wanted to be free of this life, of the consequences that come with it. Wally had to pay the ultimate consequence that comes with being a superhero.
Good, Barry. Oh, man. Artemis is so gonna kill me for this. And don't even get me started on Mom and Dad. Kid? Just tell them. Okay? Kid!
This life has consequences. It is definitely something that Wally learned in the 1st season, something he had experienced firsthand during the 5-year time skip, and those were consequences he was seeking to avoid for not only him, but the woman that he loved so much by no longer being in the game, by no longer being a superhero. But ultimately, in choosing to suit up that last time, in choosing to be the hero that everybody needed in that moment, to being Kid Flash, Wally gave his life away and ultimately died. And this was needed. It was a genuine shock to everybody involved, and it was a shock to me. I didn't even expect this to happen in the slightest, and I don't think most of the people in the audience were ready for it. But I think that's the point. The showrunners, I believe, wanted to get across the idea that this life is dangerous, that nobody is considered safe, and even those who try so hard to walk away are ultimately pulled back in and are going to end up giving the same fate that Tula met, that Jason met, that the original, no, the second Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, met. Ultimately, this life comes with consequences and it comes with dangers. And to show that to everybody, and especially to show to a character like Nightwing, that taking all of these risks is not worth it, because eventually it will lead to the death of somebody close to you that you care about. Part of this is a little bit on Nightwing for actively trying to bring all of his friends in on these secrets, and I think this lesson hits him the hardest, and it's the idea that this life has consequences, and sometimes those consequences are irreversible. If you haven't noticed, this video's runtime is about 50% of the original Wally West video that I posted. This video has half the runtime that the first Wally West video I posted has, because there is half the things to talk about, because there is a distinct lack of the character, and as much as I think it is narratively brilliant, I will never forgive the showrunners for killing off one of my favorite characters in fiction, one of the best adaptations of a character I've had, despite the fact that it is comic book inaccurate with the speed of Wally. I loved this character so much. And so while I do believe he needed to die, I never wanted him to die. And I think that's why his death worked so well and why I think it's perfect. Thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. You all take care and have an absolutely fantastic day. Okay, time to do the whole YouTuber thing. Thank you all again so much for watching. If you want to like, it helps out the channel a lot. If you want to leave a dislike, that works too, but please leave a comment down below telling me why, as constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you. You know, if you want to support me even further than just watching this video, which is more than enough, I have a Patreon in the description, which you can sub to for like $1 a month. It helps me make all these videos a lot faster, and as well, you'll get to see these videos early, and whatever changes I have to make for YouTube's copyright system will not be a part of that version of the video. As well, you can join the Discord, where you can talk to me and a bunch of other people that watch the videos and just like to hang out and chill, play video games, all that fun stuff. And finally, if you're in the $5 or above tier, I shout your name out at the end of each and every one of those videos, so enough time keeping those people waiting. Shout out Demetrius Youngblood, shout out Metal Monk, shout out West Belladonna, shout out Oscar, shout out McGann, shout out eSibert13, shout out Gabriel Afonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.